Get that mud away from my kid! Someone do something! The scream sliced through the thick Moroccan heat like a whip. Tourists near the dusty marketplace froze, startled. Children clung to their parents. Shopkeepers leaned out from shaded stalls. And there, in the middle of the chaos, stood a German shepherd, ribs visible beneath her scruffy coat, panting, trembling, but not running. She didn't bark or growl. She didn't move toward the child. She just stood there, eyes locked onto the man who had yelled, tail down, ears low, her body frozen in some invisible grief. Her name was Zara. No one there knew that, of course. To them, she was just another stray, one of many trying to survive the hot, unforgiving streets. But Zara wasn't like the others. Her eyes didn't flicker with fear or aggression. They begged, pleaded, searched. Just a few feet away, a woman in a faded denim jacket paused. She had been passing through on her way to the spice stalls, camera in one hand, bottle of water in the other. Her name was Isabel Romero, a solo traveler from Spain, who had been chasing color, culture, and maybe some quiet healing after the loss of her mother. She had seen hungry dogs before, but something about Zara made her pause. The dog's gaze wasn't wild. It was focused, almost intentional. As the crowd muttered and dispersed, Zara finally moved, not away from the people, but toward the alley. Slowly, limping slightly on one paw, she looked over her shoulder at Isabel, as if making sure she was watching. Then she disappeared behind a stack of empty crates. "Wait," Isabel whispered, stepping away from the road, ignoring the vendor who had started calling after her about silk scarves. She followed the dog. The alley was narrow, shadowed from the sun lined with peeling plaster and the sour smell of rotting produce. Isabel had no idea what she was doing, but something inside her, the part that still ached when she passed a mother holding a toddler's hand, refused to turn around. Zara paused halfway down the alley, glancing back. Then she ducked under a bent metal fence, leading into what looked like the remains of a burned-out shop. Isabel hesitated, heart racing. Then she crouched and crawled after her. It was dark and stifling inside. Dust floated in the air, beams of sun breaking through the charred roof. The smell hit her first, damp fur, mildew, and something else, something metallic. And then she saw them. A small bundle of blankets lay in the corner, barely moving. Isabel stepped closer, her breath catching. It wasn't a litter of puppies. It was a human baby, swaddled in a stained onesie, cheeks streaked with grime, lips trembling as if he'd long forgotten how to cry. The baby's chest rose and fell, shallow, labored. Zara nosed at him gently, then looked up at Isabel. It was not a coincidence. It was a plea. Isabel's knees buckled, and she dropped beside them, hands shaking. She checked the baby's forehead, burning, dehydrated, starving, maybe hours from death. Maybe less. She pulled her scarf off and wrapped it tighter around him. "Who left you here?" she whispered. "Who did this?" Zara gave a low whine and lay beside the baby, curling protectively around him like a living shield. Her tail thumped. Weakly, her body pressed against the child's side. She had been keeping him warm, guarding him, and now she had asked for help. Isabel fumbled for her phone, hands slippery with sweat. No signal. Not here. Not in this crumbling part of the city tourists weren't meant to find. She had to get out. Fast. With the baby in her arms and Zara limping close behind, Isabel retraced her steps into the light. Her heart pounded as she flagged down a passing motorbike driver, ignoring the bewildered stares. She didn't stop to explain. She just climbed on, cradling the baby, yelling over the engine, "Hospital, now, please!" As the bike sped off, kicking up dust and confusion, Zara chased them for a few yards, then collapsed, panting in the street. Isabel turned. Their eyes met again, just for a second. Zara hadn't brought her here to be saved. She had brought her here to save the baby, and whatever pain she carried was still waiting to be uncovered. The hospital was overrun, loud, chaotic, patients in hallways, nurses rushing from one emergency to the next, and a long line at the reception. Isabel burst through the glass doors, breathless and cradling, the baby in her arms. The tiny body was limp, his skin pale beneath the dirt. A nurse looked up, confused for a moment, until she saw the child. Within seconds, a gurney appeared. Isabel didn't even have to explain. The urgency in her eyes, the condition of the baby, the sheer panic radiating from her body. It was enough. Doctors surrounded the infant and wheeled him away, leaving Isabel standing in the corridor, shaking. The cold air conditioning clashed with the heat in her chest. Her hands were covered in sweat and dust. Her heart wouldn't slow down. She kept glancing back at the doors, half expecting Zara to appear, limping her way in. But the dog had vanished. The moment Isabel left on the bike. No collar, no tags, just a stare that still haunted her. A young pediatrician, Dr. Farid, appeared an hour later with eyes full of concern and awe. "If you hadn't brought him when you did," he said, voice low, "we would be having a different conversation." Isabel nodded numbly. "Will he make it?" "He's severely malnourished, borderline septic and dehydrated," Dr. Farid said. "But he's stable, for now." She sat down on a nearby bench, the adrenaline crashing into her like a wave. That's when the questions started clawing at her brain. Who was this child? How did he end up in a burned-out ruin guarded by a stray German shepherd? And more importantly, why did that dog know to seek out help? It hadn't been random. Zara had chosen her, led her there, trusted her. The next morning, Isabel returned to the alley. She walked slowly through the market, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Vendors tried to call her over, but she ignored them. When she reached the narrow path behind the spice stalls, her heart started racing. The scorched building still stood there, silent and hollow. And then she saw her, Zara, lying in the same spot by the broken crates, panting, exhausted. She didn't get up, just lifted her head and wagged her tail weakly. Isabel dropped to her knees. "You stayed," she whispered. Zara's eyes fluttered closed and opened again. And then, slowly, she moved aside. At first, Isabel thought it was just a bundle of trash behind her, but it wasn't. 2 tiny puppies lay nestled in the corner, frail, whimpering, blind. One was barely breathing. Oh my God. Isabel's throat tightened. The baby hadn't been the only one. Zara had been trying to protect all of them. Her own pups and the abandoned human infant. One had made it out. The others hadn't even been seen. Zara had never begged for herself. She had begged for them. Tears spilled down Isabel's cheeks as she scooped up the pups. She wrapped them in her scarf and looked at Zara, who tried to stand, stumbled, and fell. The pads of her paws were raw, bleeding. One leg was swollen. Her body was covered in scabs. "She's not going to survive another night like this," Isabel murmured. She reached out, lifting Zara gently, holding both pups in her arms as she flagged down another bike. This time, the hospital wasn't the stop. She took them to a small veterinary clinic near the outskirts of the city, where an old man named Dr. Malik examined them in silence. His hands were kind, his eyes even kinder. "This dog is no ordinary stray," he said quietly after the exam. "She's been starved, beaten, and overworked. But her heart, it's intact and strong. One puppy had to be put on oxygen, the other barely nursed." Zara didn't leave their side, even as IVs were placed in her leg. She didn't whimper, didn't move, just kept watching them, eyes filled with something deeper than pain, something human. Back at the hospital, the baby had opened his eyes. Isabel visited him every day, learning from the nurses that he had no record, no match in the missing children database, no fingerprints, no clues. Only one piece of torn fabric in his blanket, a scrap from a military uniform. It was enough to spark whispers, but Isabel stayed focused on what she could control. Within a week, the stronger puppy began to bark. The weaker one opened its eyes. And Zara walked again. When the pediatrician asked Isabel if she wanted to apply for temporary guardianship of the baby until child services found answers, she said yes, before he finished the sentence. On the day she brought the baby to visit Zara, something extraordinary happened. Zara whined softly and stepped forward. The baby reached for her fur with tiny, clumsy fingers. His hand gripped her ear gently, and instead of pulling away, Zara licked his face. It was the first time he smiled. Dr. Farid and Dr. Malik both watched from the hallway, silent, moved. The woman who had come to Morocco to escape her own grief had become the anchor for 3 broken souls, a baby with no name, 2 pups with no future, and a dog who had once begged the world to look past her wounds. But only one woman had listened, and the story of what followed, well, that hadn't even begun yet. The days blurred together inside the small veterinary clinic, where the rhythm of healing was both silent and sacred. Isabel spent hours each day, moving between the hospital nursery where the rescued baby now lay recovering, and the quiet corner where Zara and her surviving puppies rested. There was something fragile and yet unbreakable about the bond that had formed between them. A tourist from another continent, an orphaned child, and a mother dog who had refused to let any of them be forgotten. One afternoon, as rain tapped gently on the clinic's windows, Dr. Malik sat beside Isabel and sighed. "We may never know the full story," he murmured, "but I've seen enough to understand this dog was protecting something bigger than just her litter." Isabel looked up. "You mean the baby?" He nodded slowly. "She could have left him. Any dog would have. But she stayed. She led you back. She gave up her own safety for him." Isabel glanced at Zara, who was curled protectively around the weaker pup. "She's more human than most people I've met." But just when things seemed to be finding a rhythm, everything shifted again. A nurse from the hospital called Isabel late that evening. Her voice was strained. "You need to come. There's someone here. Says he knows the baby." Isabel's heart sank. She rushed over, thoughts spinning. Had they found the parents? A relative? Or something darker? At the hospital, a tall man stood by the nursery window. He wore a worn army jacket, and his eyes, tired, sunken, trembling, were fixed on the tiny infant in the crib. His name was Adil. He introduced himself as a former soldier. He had returned from duty only a week ago, learning upon his arrival that his wife had died in a fire that destroyed the neighborhood they had once called home. Their newborn son had been declared missing, presumed dead. But Adil never believed. My wife, she had a dog, a German shepherd she trusted more than anyone. She said, if anything happened, Zara would protect the baby. Isabel's knees went weak. Her breath caught. "Zara," she whispered. He turned to her. "You've seen her." "I've more than seen her," Isabel said. "She saved your son." Tears slipped from Adil's eyes as he walked into the nursery and reached into the crib. The baby stirred and grasped his father's finger. It was the first time he had responded to anyone with that kind of trust. The hospital began. Formal procedures to verify Adil's claim. DNA testing. Family interviews. But for Isabel there was no doubt. The way Zara had carried herself, the way she had protected the baby, the urgency in her eyes when she sought help, it all made sense now. Back at the clinic, Isabel stood beside Zara's cot and gently stroked her head. "He's safe," she said. "You kept your promise." Zara blinked slowly and released a soft breath, as though a weight had lifted from her battered chest. But the story was far from over. A few nights later, someone broke into the clinic. The puppies were unharmed, but Zara had been injured again. Her old wounds reopened. Surveillance revealed a man trying to snatch one of the pups, only to be driven off by Zara's ferocious growl. She had defended her children once more, despite her failing strength. Dr. Malik, furious and shaken, told Isabel, she needs a safe place, somewhere permanent. Somewhere she's not just another stray with a story. That's when Isabel made her decision. She went to Adil the next morning. "I want to adopt Zara. If she's not already part of your family, I want her to be part of mine." Adil didn't hesitate. "She's more than a dog," he said. "She's a savior. And if there's anyone who's earned the right to stay with her, it's you." So the paperwork began. The puppies would grow under Zara's watchful eye. The baby, officially named Idris, would return home with his father in a week. And Isabel, who had come to Morocco to escape her own scars, suddenly found herself forming roots in a country that had offered her nothing but the unexpected. But fate, as always, had one last twist. A woman from a nearby shelter arrived to visit Zara after hearing her story. She had seen a report from years ago, a missing dog named Zara, reported stolen by a military family who had served in disaster zones. Photos were matched, records aligned. It turned out, Zara had once been part of a trained emergency canine unit. She hadn't just known how to save lives, she had been trained to. And yet, even after being lost, abused, and forgotten, she had never lost that instinct. Isabel stared at Zara that evening, tears welling in her eyes. "You were never just a stray. You were always meant to protect, even when no one protected you." Zara nudged her hand gently, her eyes calm and knowing. In a world full of broken things, some spirits refused to shatter. Some fought quietly. Some waited for the right person to notice. And some, like Zara, saved more lives than anyone would ever count. And all it took was one moment of trust, one silent plea, one desperate German shepherd mother who refused to give up, no matter how many times the world tried to forget her. The next morning brought a sky heavy with clouds and a silence that felt almost too still, as if the world were bracing for something unseen. Isabel awoke on the clinic cot, with her fingers still curled beneath Zara's paw. The dog hadn't moved all night, still weak, but still breathing. The smallest of the 3 pups had curled into her belly again, while the other 2 were gently snoring nearby, each one finally fed, warm, and safe. Dr. Malik entered quietly and stood beside Isabel without speaking. He handed her a printed report, something from the animal hospital downtown. Isabel scanned it, her eyes widening. "This confirms it," she whispered. "Zara was bred from a military line. She has a microchip, but it was never registered in her name, only to a retired handler named Samir Qureshi. He was stationed here a decade ago. He died 4 years back." Dr. Malik nodded. "She was likely stolen, sold off, maybe even used for breeding. But she wasn't just any dog. She was trained. That's why she knew how to find help, why she wrapped herself around the baby, why she wouldn't leave without leading you back." Isabel's chest tightened as she looked down at Zara again. She didn't just survive. She remembered everything she was ever taught, even when humans forgot her. A faint whimper interrupted them. It wasn't one of the puppies. It came from the hallway. Isabel stepped out and saw the child. The baby boy who had been in critical care was now awake, small arms flailing, mouth open, demanding something no nurse could understand. The boy, Idris, had no mother to soothe him, no warmth except the machine's sterile crib and tubes tied to his fragile body. Instinct moved Isabel before reason could catch up. She called out gently and carried one of Zara's still warm towels from the clinic nursery. Then she did something most hospitals would never allow. She laid the towel across the infant's chest and brought Zara close to the crib's side. Idris stopped crying. Instantly, he blinked slowly, lips quivering, as though recognizing something that even his young brain couldn't fully grasp. His tiny fingers reached out and touched the blanket, his breathing easing. Zara didn't bark or growl. She didn't even rise, but her eyes opened, fixed calmly on the boy through the glass. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't chance. That dog had stayed beside him for days, maybe longer, before Isabel ever found them. She wasn't just guarding her pups. She was protecting him, too. Suddenly, a phone rang. Dr. Malik answered, then stiffened. He handed it to Isabel with a strange look. A voice on the other end was shaking. "Is this the woman who brought in the German shepherd with the baby?" the man asked. His name was Adil, a former soldier who had recently returned to Marrakesh from active duty abroad. His wife had died in a building fire weeks ago, and with her, their baby boy had vanished. He had been told the baby had died, but something didn't feel right. Someone had mentioned a story on local news. A German shepherd carrying a human child. A dog refusing to leave a mountain road. "My wife trusted that dog with everything," Adil said quietly. "Her name was Zara." Isabel nearly dropped the phone. That evening, Adil arrived at the hospital. The moment he stepped into the nursery, the baby stirred again, arms twitching toward the sound of his father's voice. The room held its breath as Adil stepped closer and whispered the child's name. "Idris." The baby turned his head and let out the tiniest sob, not of pain, but of recognition. Zara, too weak to stand, let out a soft, rasping bark from across the room. It was her final confirmation. The doctors ordered expedited DNA testing. The results would take a few days, but no one in that clinic had doubts anymore. What mattered now was safety and family. But even as hope glimmered on the horizon, shadows returned. That same night, someone tried to break into the clinic. A man, seen only briefly on grainy camera footage, had tried to steal the remaining puppies. Zara had fought back, despite her fragile condition. Her shoulder was torn open again in the struggle. She had driven him away, but she was bleeding badly. When Isabel found her, she was curled tightly around her pups again, trembling and panting, blood staining the blanket beneath her. "No more," Isabel whispered, pressing her forehead to Zara's. "You shouldn't have to protect anyone anymore. Not like this." Dr. Malik worked through the night. Isabel refused to sleep, and by sunrise, Zara's condition had stabilized, but barely. "She won't last long unless we get her to a proper facility," Malik said grimly. "But transporting her now could kill her." A choice had to be made. Risk the journey for better care, or let her rest where she was, surrounded by the only family she trusted. That morning, something shifted. Isabel walked into the nursery with Zara's blanket again, placed it beside Idris, and said gently, "You saved him. You deserve to see how this ends. Zara, barely able to rise, dragged herself forward, inch by inch. Her head lowered next to the baby's crib as Idris blinked up at her through the glass. It wasn't just recognition, it was connection. The kind that can't be taught, explained, or broken. For a moment the world felt quiet, but something was rising. A question, a choice. The sun rose behind a veil of pale clouds, casting soft light through the nursery windows. It was the kind of morning that made you believe in second chances. Quiet, warm, and gentle enough to ease even the most restless soul. But for Isabel, it began with a lump in her throat, and a prayer she hadn't known she believed in. Zara was still breathing, but barely. Her chest moved with effort, each rise slower than the last. Her body had given everything it could, fighting off starvation, infection, exhaustion, and finally an attack meant to rip away the only thing she had left. Her pups were curled beside her, nestled so close it was hard to see where one body ended and another began. And just a few feet away, baby Idris lay peacefully, warm under hospital lights, his tiny fist resting atop the edge of Zara's worn blanket. It wasn't just luck that had brought them all here. It was will. Zara's will. A mother's instinct. A soldier's memory. A dog's unshakable devotion. The vet's report came in quietly. Internal bleeding. Her organs were failing. Transporting her to a full facility wouldn't buy more than a few hours. All anyone could do now was give her peace. But Zara hadn't let go. Not yet. Adil arrived before noon, still carrying a bouquet of white tulips, his wife's favorite, and a toy giraffe he'd once bought for a baby he never got to hold. When he walked in and saw Zara curled around her pups and staring at Idris with tired eyes, he dropped to his knees beside her and whispered, "You kept him safe." Zara blinked slowly and shifted her head to rest near his lap. It was an unspoken answer. Yes. Through the storm, through the hunger, through the screaming silence of abandonment, she had kept his son alive. Tears fell freely now. From Adil, from Isabel, even Dr. Malik stepped aside, pretending to check a clipboard, though his glasses fogged with grief. The hospital had made arrangements. Zara would be allowed to stay in the nursery until her final breath. Her pups would remain with her. Idris would be moved back in beside them, but there was something else that needed to be done. Something Zara hadn't finished yet. That evening, Isabel sat beside her one last time and spoke in a low, steady voice. "Your babies will grow. Be up safe. Idris has his father back. You don't have to fight anymore, Zara." For the first time, Zara closed her eyes without flinching, and a few minutes later, she was gone. Not with a whimper, not with fear, with peace. She passed the way only the bravest souls do, after their duty was done. Word spread quickly. The story of the German shepherd who saved a human baby and guarded her puppies until the very end flooded news feeds and morning broadcasts. But for those who were there, who touched her fur and looked into her amber eyes, Zara wasn't just a story. She was proof that love doesn't need words, that family isn't always blood, that sometimes the smallest heartbeat and the fiercest bark can shake the world into remembering what it means to care. Adil held a small funeral just outside the hospital garden. It wasn't grand, just a wooden box, a fresh patch of soil, and 3 sleeping puppies tucked safely in a nearby crate, watching from the shade. Isabel laid a single white tulip atop the grave. A tag hung from the box's handle. It read, "Zara, soldier, mother, hero." Weeks passed, but the memory of that dog never faded. Adil legally adopted all 3 puppies, naming them Noor, Bahar, and Tofan, light, spring, and storm. He said they represented what Zara had given his son, a light in darkness, hope after, sorrow and strength through chaos. Isabel, changed forever by the experience, applied for permanent residency in Morocco. She wanted to stay close, not just to the family, but to the feeling that something bigger had taken place. A reminder that sometimes it's not the loudest cries that change the world. It's the quiet loyalty of a soul that refuses to let go. And baby Idris? He grew stronger with each passing day. Doctors said it was a miracle. Adil said it was love. But Isabel knew the truth. It was Zara. In the years to come, a bronze statue was placed in the hospital garden. It showed a German shepherd curled protectively around a baby, 3 small pups nestled into her side. The plaque beneath it bore a simple line. She asked for nothing. She gave everything. And every time the wind passed through the garden, every time a child laughed nearby or a bird landed softly on the statue's edge, It felt like Zara was still there, watching, protecting, loving, always.